non-codex formats. And these are really fragile. I'm going to leave, Ray is going to be handling these. So the codex is the most pervasive format for the medieval text transmission for the text carriers, but it's not the only one. There are very good reasons why other formats are used for other things. So the first thing we're going to look at is this fantastic scroll. This is Peter Poitiers, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So can you zoom in here so we can take a look at this? Can we do it a little more?
Oh, sure. I'm so sorry.
Perfect. All right. So what we're looking at here is Peter Poitiers' text. It's called Compendium in Genealogia Christi. So it's basically the genealogy of Jesus from Adam and Eve all the way down, and it ends at the very bottom. It goes on and on and on. And it sort of tells the history, biblical history in the middle of all of this. But the main point of this text was to show genealogically how Jesus was descended from King David, which was critically important in order to fulfill the prophecy of Isaiah. So that's the whole point of this, is to prove once and for all that Jesus is descended from the line of King David. And you do that with these biblical genealogies. Now, you could do this in a codex, but why is a roll better than a codex? Any thoughts from anybody?
It's continuous.
Right, exactly. It just goes on and on and on. You don't have to get to the bottom of the page and then turn the page and figure out where you are. If you've ever done your own family tree, you will have encountered this problem. If you've got just some sheets of paper, what you almost inevitably end up doing is taping them together at the bottom and making a scroll. So scrolls are the perfect format for genealogies. And in the late Middle Ages, genealogies become so important. Not just this, which is a theological text, but in the middle of the 100 Years' War, you got to prove who has the right to be king of France. And how are we going to do that? But with a giant, complicated genealogy. Royal dynasties love their genealogies. And so this form, even though it feels very antiquated and old-fashioned, has a huge comeback in the late Middle Ages, 13th, 14th, 15th century. You just start seeing these things proliferate. And they're really hard to work with. They're really awkward. They roll off the edge of the table when you're not looking. Not that that has ever happened to me. And,
it doesn't happen either.
But you have to put weights over there. Parchment wants to curl up. Parchment doesn't want to be flat because it comes from an animal and the animal is curly. And so parchment, and the longer it's rolled up like that to be stored, the more it holds onto that position. So parchment really doesn't like to lay flat. So you have to be thoughtful about weighting it down and to make sure that it stays open. The rolls are, you can see right here where the seam is between the sheets of the roll. Usually one sheet is one animal skin, although this might be half a skin. What do you think?
You heard it tell.
Yeah.
Cat. Looks like cat.
It would, it would depend again if you could see which way the spinal cord was going, but you can't really. I don't see it.
It's in English, so more likely to be short.
Ah, okay.
Just because, just in terms of they tend to use sheep and calf, but this is a very nice skin. So
it's beautiful. So it's probably one per animal, because two, again, that would be a really big animal. So the sheets are, there's usually a tiny bit of overlap and they're pasted together, which means, again, because they're not sewn, they're pasted, these joins can be really fragile and they can pop really easily and separate. And so a lot of scrolls are incomplete at the top of the bottom because they're missing, this is complete at the top, I assume it's complete at the bottom too. But oftentimes you'll find these are missing the first few or the last few. One of the cool things about this text, it doesn't really have anything to do with the topic for the day, but it's cool, are these diagrams. that get thrown in. So here's a map of the world, a pretty typical TO map with Asia, Africa, and Europe. And right in the middle is where Jerusalem would be. And then you also have diagrams of, so here's one down here. This one shows the encampment of the tribes after the Exodus, when they're encamped in the desert. This diagram shows how they were organized. And there should be a map of Jerusalem.
There should be. I don't know how much farther.
Let's see how far we can get there.
Sorry.
No, okay. So one of the other really interesting diagrams in this is a map of Jerusalem that shows the gates into the city that you still see today when you go to Jerusalem. It's just a fantastic text, and it gets picked up and used by other world chronicles. They always start with Peter Poitiers and then carry on with whatever else they want to do.
And if I may plug our collections briefly.
Yes, please.
A few years ago, I purchased a bunch of individual sheets that weren't sewn together of a French version of Peter Poitiers. And so if you're interested, it has some very interesting places where they completed. So if you're interested in the process and that sort of thing, and this is, the world hasn't seen this because it hasn't gotten out of our collections. It hasn't made it into the catalog yet. But like Lisa, I love rolls. They're one of my favorite formats. They're fascinating in a lot of ways. So we've gotten a lot of rolls recently.
And the other thing to note is that they almost always are only written on one side. Not always, but most of the time.
Greek ones apparently were written on two sides. We have a Greek roll that's written, it's Christography, it's silver and gold script, and it's written on both sides. The only thing I've ever seen that was designed to be written on both sides.
Yeah. I think there's one at Penn also, but I think the other side is later.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah,
something
this is
that's
one where
added
it's
on
actually
choice.
designed to be both sides.
Yeah. And then you also find scrolls used for kind of like as charms. You have that fantastic one that's the Birth Girdle. Right, tell them about that.
So the
That's
Birth
very
Girdle
cool.
it's a much narrower piece, and it is supposed to be half the length of the Virgin Mary's height. And you were supposed to wear it literally as a girdle around your belly when you were giving birth. And as you probably know, the Virgin Mary gave birth from the side. So it was painless and didn't risk her life. And so the idea was that you wanted a birth like Mary gave birth to Jesus that was painless and that you survived. And so this charm literally has prayers on one side, then on the back of it, it says, this is half the length of the Virgin's body. And so it makes that interesting connection.
Very cool. And so that's literally, you're literally supposed to take it and the physical object and wrap it around you. And there are other manuscripts that work that way. There are some books of ours that have a life of St. Margaret in them. And St. Margaret, because she was swallowed by a dragon and then burst forth from its belly. If you watch Sharknado, I don't know if I'm dating myself already. Remember in Sharknado, Jager's laughing at Jager knows what I'm talking about. So in Sharknado, at the end, our hero gets swallowed up by a shark. He just happens to have a buzzsaw with him, and he saws his way out of the shark. And that is literally what St. Margaret did, but using a crucifix rather than a chainsaw. And so she becomes the patroness of pregnant women because she managed to emerge from the belly of the dragon. And so in the books that have her life recorded in them, books of ours, in that Vita, she literally says, when you're giving birth, put this on your belly and you'll be fine. So it's the same kind of thing where it's this physical object that you're not just supposed to sit and read it, you're supposed to actually do a thing with it. And then we have two more formats. Any questions about scrolls before we move on? No? Okay. So, yes.
Are there any that are bound instead of being that are stitched together rather than pasted onto one another?
Yeah, it's less common, I think. No, maybe not. I don't know. What do you think?
The problem is if you noted, if you sew them together, you get a ridge, and so it's not seamless. Sorry, but literally. So most of them that we have, but even that one, what they've done is they've actually sewed a few inches in and then glued the rest of it, because the glue is not, as you've mentioned, it's not a stable medium. This is made from parchment often, and so it's not very good. And so some we definitely have stitched together, and we even have some of the books that are made where they've taken the individual parts of this, cut them up, and made it into a codex.
Yes, I've seen
So
that
that's
too.
something interesting.
That's super awkward, because you remember this giant, you know,
That are written on one side.
right, yeah, exactly. So I wrote a book about one of these scrolls,
Yes,
these Chronicle Scrolls, and at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, they took this giant 50-foot scroll and they cut it up, not even in the natural sheets.
Oh,
They just cut it wherever
really?
they
Oh my
felt
gosh.
like it
Okay.
and bound it into these giant books that you need 2 tables to look at. And it was much easier to look at when it was a scroll. And sometimes scrolls are on rods or they're on, you know, they're stored in boxes. Sometimes they fall through the cracks of collections because they're such an odd format. They don't really fit they don't fit on your regular bookcase.
Yeah, literally when I first got here, I went through our Arabic collection and there were 3 scrolls just sitting on a shelf because they didn't know what to do with them. And it turns out they were amulets. They were like this martyr scroll. So there were these little magical amulets. And so they really weren't part of anybody's tradition in a real sense. I mean, nobody wants you to know that they're using amulets in a modern religious sense. And so they were orphaned, but they've since been rescued. We now take very good care of them. But also, so those of you in the Jewish tradition, you might know the Estrict Scrolls. And those are an amazing sort of, it's on leather rather than parchment. So very, very interesting. And of course, the Torah itself, which should never be broken up and used. And yet, nonetheless, we do have a lot of parts of it, meaning Christians likely stole Torahs and broke them up because they were such valuable parchment.
In fact, you have, there's an incunable that you can see from right out upstairs that was bound in a piece of Torah scroll.
Yes, and we're carbon dating that because the book is
really?
dated to 1475, which was the same time as these blood libel cases taking place in Europe, where Jews were being tortured and burned, and their books were supposed to be burned. But I don't think they were. I think Christians were like, why would you burn a very expensive piece of parchment? And I think Christians stole that stuff and were used it. So if the carbon dating comes out as pre-1500,
Oh, how cool.
then I think it'll make that case. But
Yeah.
we're still waiting for that to come
I
out.
didn't know you were doing that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm passing by it.
Wow, that's amazing. Whenever my mom would come here, she always wanted to go take a look at that. She found that very sort
Well,
of
bring her
sad and
down, bring
moving.
her down. We're happy to show you.
All right, so we've got 2 more formats. So the first is, and this one I would encourage you, we can't open it, unfortunately, it's super fragile. So we're just going to look at it closed. But if you go to the website, actually, maybe this is a good time for me to share my screen, and we can pull up the images. Hang on. We can do it all. Hold on one second. Find it. What's the shelf point, Ray?
923.
923, there it is.
So I just want to let you know, the reason we're not taking this out is that because of the way it's bound, which is at a single point, anytime you open it, it can be broken very easily. And so we really only have the photo facsimile. If there's a reason to undo it, we certainly would do that. We just don't do it for classes. But if there's a research reason that somebody needed to see it, that would be a reason for us to open it up.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen really quick, and then so you can see what we're talking about. There we go. Did that work? Yes. Here it is. That working? Yes. Great. Okay. So wait, something is in the. Someone wrote something in the chat. I tweeted. Oh, that was Pius the 6th. Okay. Cancel. I'm going to open it in Mirador. It's easier to see. So what we've got here is a literally a folding calendar, like an almanac, and it would be really cool if we could open it, because then you could sort of see how all the pages work. But the idea was that you would literally carry this around with you tucked into your belt, a girdle, using the and it would hang from this this little pointed bit at the top of the binding that we could see. And so each page, you're probably more familiar with the contents than I am. Do you want to walk us through it? Do you know what all these little bits are?
Actually,
Oh, okay. So, well, so this is something, it looks like a poem about the months, about different, is this, yes, yeah. So at any rate, so each page of this has a different function. So here's a calendar. So this is your basic saints calendar. It's probably used in Paris or something. So that's going to go on for a bit. And then afterwards, you have all of this information about what you do in different parts of the year, or what kinds of illnesses how you treat them, and how that treatment varies depending what's happening with the moon, or what's happening with the seasons, or whether it's raining, or and so it goes on and on and on. It's fascinating. I mean, how many pages are there? Sometimes they're just a calendar, or sometimes they're just like an almanac, sort of going month by month. But this one has just tons of stuff in it. This looks like it has some sort of theological treatise here. It just goes on and on and on. It's really fascinating. But we can't see it open. But it is a great example of the kind of portable object that if you were a physician, say, or some kind of mendicant friar, and you needed to have this information, you would stick it under your belt and take it with you out on the road. So that's one kind of portable book. So now I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. Wait, open it again for 1 second. So if you see, we've got the actual, hold on. Oh, I did, okay. So we've got the actual object here, and then the case. I got that backwards?
This is the case, that's the object.
Okay, so that's the object, that's the case. So you can see the object itself is a little bit longer than the case, and you have this little bit that sticks out that presumably would have had like a chain, or not a chain, but something attached to it that you could fasten in your belt to hold it in place. And sometimes the way that they're oriented, and this is probably like that, it hangs down so that you pick it up this way and you can read it. So that when it hangs, it actually hangs upside down because it allows you to then lift it and open it and refer to whatever it is that you need to refer to. They're very common in the late Middle Ages, but they just don't survive in great numbers because they're so fragile. The things that are most loved and most well used are the least likely to survive. So we get this, in terms of the survivals, we get kind of a slanted sense of what people read, because so many of the most popular things didn't make it. I mean, think about Chaucer, right? I mean, they're like, God knows how many Chaucer manuscripts. Those things got read to pieces.
Yeah.
So there's no way to know almost how many there originally were, except we know there were a lot more than there are today.
You can imagine with something like a birth girdle, after a few uses.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You're going to need
exactly. So these kind of objects that are extra codicological, I don't know, what would you call them?
That's good. I don't know.
Paracodicological?
I like it. Yeah. I like the
don't survive in as great numbers as the codex, because they're just not as durable. So that's one kind of portable object. Then we have one more.
If you guys are interested in studying these, they're often called bat books because of the way they open up like a bat's wings. So I know that sounds odd, but if you're looking for bibliography on them, look for bat book. And the Met just bought one that is a Chronicle, which it's one of the most interesting things I've ever seen.
Oh.
But they have it, and it's online.
Oh, that's very cool.
Look at it.
All right, so this next one, this is also extremely fragile. We're going to look at Ray is going to take out the reconstruction. The actual object here is, again, extraordinarily fragile, and we do not touch it. It's here displayed under lucite, and nobody touches it. Oh, thank you. This is a literal girdle book. So if I were wearing a belt, this would tuck under it, and I would just carry my book around with me wherever I went, so that I could open it and read it when I needed it.
Sorry.
Ooh, fascinating. A book of secrets waiting to be unveiled. But you can see how it is, and this is a reconstruction of how it's attached,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
So it actually is attached like a book cover, but instead of a regular book cover, it has all of this extra leather with this knot at the end that allows it to be tucked in to your belt and carried around with you in much the same way as that book, except this actually has a binding.
Mm-hmm.
What is the actual manuscript?
That is a Latin copy of Boethius' Consolation Philosophy.
And you never want to leave home without it.
You don't. And what's fun about it is we have the only Girdle book that is not a book of hours. So normally these are books
Cool.
of hours. And why somebody would want to carry the Consolation of Philosophy is absolutely fascinating. The other fun thing is that these things are often associated with women. So in a lot of manuscript illuminations, you have women and they're carrying something that looks sort of like a lantern. And people have actually thought they were carrying lamps because it has usually a boss in the middle or something that looks like a flame and then the boss that's here. So was this a woman that was carrying the Consolation of Philosophy? Or was it a more, were more men using these than we realize? But fascinating, and it's deerskin, and you can't really tell, but it was green, dyed green.
Oh, really?
So
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
they've looked, in these areas where you can open up the thing, and they've seen. So it was a beautiful green color book.
Is the manuscript itself digitized?
Yes.
It is. Oh, okay. So we can go online and look at the book itself. But look how tiny it is. I mean, it's just so beautifully portable. When you compare, this is another great thing, obviously, about looking at the thing in person instead of just online, because you really get the scale. There's my hand. It's literally the size of my hand, as opposed to the manuscripts we looked at first, which are 3 times the size. They're the size of this box. So you can really see the difference between these sort of early monastic manuscripts that are meant to be plunked on a table and read aloud, as opposed to a more personal, private devotion or private reading book that you would actually carry around with you. So you can really see how the form and the function are so intertwined. In this case in particular, it is fascinating to think why someone would need to carry a copy of Boethius with them. I mean, I don't leave home without my Boethius. I assume you don't. Okay.
It's an important thing.
It's very important. You never want to leave home without your Boethius. I actually did not realize that. That's kind of amazing.
It is. It's very, very strange.
That's fascinating. All right. So that's everything.
Yeah.
We made it.
We have.
Okay. So